Hello again, everyone. Welcome to Washington Gun Law TV. I'm Washington Gun Law President William Kirk. Thanks for joining us. Coming to you from Washington's premier indoor shooting facility. Of course, that's Securite Gun Club right here in Woodinville, Washington. Hey, we're going to break away and talk about suppressors for a moment because, as you know, there is a flurry of activity going in the Reconciliation Act, or what some people are calling the Big Beautiful Bill, that could potentially remove suppressors from the purview of the NFA, translation, relieve you of a $200 tax stamp. Many of those who are normally clamoring for civilian disarmament are completely crapping their pants, and they're coming up with every fairy tale and fantasy type story to try to prove that these things are dangerous and need actually probably even more regulation than they currently have. What we're going to do today, with the help of our good friends here at Securite Gun Club, is we're going to try to dispel 4 myths. And in them helping me, we hope to help all of you educate yourself so that you can educate others about what the truth really is. So today, let's spend a few minutes and let's talk about dispelling the big myths about suppressors. Okay, America, listen, as I mentioned, if you want to watch the sausage be made, if you want to know what happens on a day-by-day, hour-by-hour, minute-by-minute account of what's going on in Washington, D.C. as it relates to the Big Beautiful Bill and whether or not the Shush Act or the Short Act will in fact make it into the budgetary process and be signed into law, I encourage you to watch my good friends Braden Langley over at Langley Outdoor Academies, Jared Yanis over at Guns and Gadgets. They are doing a bang-up job of covering that on a day-by-day basis. I don't have the stomach for it. What I have been watching is many of the politicians completely freak out about this, and that's a good thing because they don't want to just spend their freak out capital on an issue that they're not really worried about. So the fact that they are really beginning to piss themselves tells us that this is becoming more and more likely. What I want to do today is I want to take apart 4 of the big myths that the Elizabeth Warrens and all the other people out there keep spewing so that you can really see what's going to happen if suppressors are removed from the purview of the NFA. The 4 myths that we're going to be exploring and disproving today are: number 1, that suppressors actually silence firearms; number 2, that suppressors are used in mass shootings and oftentimes by criminals; number 3, that deregulation means these are just going to be given away with no background checks; and number 4, that this is going to solve all of our problems as it relates to suppressors no matter what state you live in. Okay, now listen, one of the myths that we need to dispel about suppressors is they are called suppressors and actually not silencers for a reason, because they don't actually silence firearms. To prove the point, I got Travis, who's the armorer here at Securite Gun Club. Travis, say hi to everyone for us.
Hey, everybody.
Now, we're going to be doing an experiment. We're going to be using a decibel meter, and I think you and I can both agree that things are going to be a little skewed because we're shooting indoors, so we got some reverberation and things like that. But we are going to shoot a handgun suppressed and unsuppressed. We're going to shoot a long gun suppressed and unsuppressed. We're not going to actually show you Travis pulling the trigger because Google will crap their pants if we do that. But why don't you tell the viewers, what is the handgun that we're going to be using today?
Today we're shooting a Staccato P. It's got a 4.7-inch barrel, full-size handgun, threaded barrel, so that we can put the suppressor. We're using a Dead Air Mojave 9mm suppressor, both shooting 115 grain, suppressed and unsuppressed. All
right, perfect. And then for our long gun, we're gonna be using what today?
We have a 16-inch Gray Ghost Precision, and we're gonna be shooting the 55 grain 5.56 and a Dead Air Nomad.
Okay, you ready to do this?
Absolutely.
All right, let's do it. One more. Okay, myth number 2 that we want to talk about, which is that suppressors are only used by criminals and they're oftentimes used in mass shootings. And I spent a ton of time on Google, and I'm not saying that's the most authoritative source there is, but we do know that if there were news articles about mass shooters using suppressors, about criminals using suppressors, there would be a litany of news stories out there because that would fit the narrative. Shockingly, the only high-profile murder case that I could find involving the use of suppressor was that, of course, of Luigi Mangione, which I would also point out was then celebrated by the very same people who are clamoring for civilian disarmament and are clamoring and fighting like holy hell to keep suppressors regulated as they currently are. Now, I'm not saying that it hasn't happened, and I'm not saying that criminal activity has not occurred using suppressors. And we've all seen Goodfellas, so we know at least there's movies that tell us that. And I'm sure that many of you can put down in the comments section some real life stories. But ask yourself this. With the millions of suppressors that are owned nationwide, if we have to scour that much to even find a scintilla of evidence of illegal use, well then, how commonly are these used for lawful purposes? Okay, now, Travis, one of the other myths that we need to dispel is if the big, beautiful bill comes to fruition and there is no longer a $200 tax stamp on suppressors, there are many who will say that, well, you're just going to be handing these things out like free candy, that you can just walk into any store and just buy one off the shelf. Mm-hmm. And what I really want everyone to understand is what a person goes through today in order to get a suppressor and what actually is going to change, because it's not a lot. So if I were to walk into Security Gun Club right here and purchase a can, what's the process that I'm going to go through today?
You're going to have to get your fingerprints finished electronically, and there will also be electronic DocuSigns, and that will, once that's finished, start the preparation for the background
And when
check.
we say electronic DocuSigns, what we're talking about is an ATF Form 4.
Correct.
Okay, which is a document that's used to conduct a federal background check on me to make sure that I am a lawful and responsible individual who is entitled to own firearms, because suppressors are being treated as though they are firearms, correct?
Correct.
Okay, now, how long does that process normally take? I know it used to take a lot longer, but things have sped up, so that process is going to take how much time, you think?
On average, we like to say close to 30 to 60 days.
Okay.
It can be much faster.
It can be much faster. Okay, but then here's the thing I want people to understand. I've already gone through a background check at the point that I've decided to make the sale,
Yes.
right? Okay, but when I come in to pick the can up, I have to fill out another document with you guys, don't I?
Correct.
And that is one that everyone's familiar with, which is the 4473. Mm-hmm. Now, you guys don't conduct a second background check at that point.
Correct, yeah.
Because it's been done already.
Yep, Box 28 says that it's already been completed by the NICS federal government background check.
Okay, but if I were to walk into Security Gun Club and get off the counter here any other firearm, shotguns, rifles, handguns, whatever, this is the form I've got to use.
Yep.
Okay, and you're going to run us through a background check regardless of what I'm purchasing here if it constitutes a firearm, right?
Yep, as well as the waiting period.
Okay, yeah, because some states have statutory waiting periods. Washington State is one of them. So you have to wait 10 business days before you can actually transfer the firearm to the purchaser.
Yes.
Okay, so here's my question. Other than removing fingerprinting in the application process, what's different about the background check that's going to be conducted if this comes out of the NFA and becomes a regulated item under the Gun Control Act? It's absent the tax. We're not talking about financial. I'm talking about procedurally. Absent the fingerprinting, what changes?
Really nothing.
That's right.
The fingerprints are going to be the big move, and most people already have that done.
That's right, because if you are in a state that has a pre-purchasing licensing requirement, you were fingerprinted for that. Mm-hmm. Or if you're in a state that has concealed carry licensing, like we are in this state, we have to get what in order to get our CPL?
Fingerprints.
We got to get fingerprinted. And guess where all those fingerprints go? They go in the exact same place, APHIS. So essentially, this myth that, these things are just going to be handed out like they're nothing, right? And you just pull one off the shelf and pay it and away you go. That's not how it's going to work, is it?
Not going to be the case. It's
going to be treated exactly like any other firearm that would be purchased here. You agree with that?
Still background check, still waiting period. Absolutely.
Okay, and then listen, the final myth that I need to dispel is that this is going to solve all of your problems as it relates to suppressors regardless of what state you live in. Au contraire. Now, if you live in a state that allows you to live free like American, congratulations, you're going to live freer. But if you live in a state such as mine, where our suppressor law, specifically in RCW 9.41.250 reads, every person who uses any contrivance or device for suppressing the noise of any firearm, unless the suppressor is legally registered and possessed in accordance with federal law is guilty of a gross misdemeanor. So notice how Washington state law says, yeah, you can own a suppressor so long as it is properly registered with the federal government. However, if this reconciliation bill goes through, remember, suppressors are still going to be regulated under the Gun Control Act. They are still going to be subject to a 4473, but they will not be registered with the federal government anymore. And you could imagine what the Washington State Attorney General is going to say if they're asked for an advisory opinion, say, hey, we don't have to register these anymore, therefore am I still in compliance with state law? Because their default answer is going to be like, no, I guess you're screwed now. You're going to have to give that up. And Washington State is not alone in that category. Now, when we take a look at the Shush Act and what's happening with the reconciliation bill, we see that there are several sections. And right now, the only two sections of the Shush Act, which is being incorporated into the budget reconciliation bill, are sections 1 and 2. But in section 3, the sponsors of this bill were very wise to point out that, hey, you know what? There are states like this. And they created basically a catch-all clause, a clause that would actually provide legal relief for people in states like Washington and similar states. That section of the bill specifically read, a person acquiring or possessing a firearm silencer in accordance with Chapter 44 of Title 18 United States Code shall be treated as meeting any registration and licensing requirements of the National Firearms Act as in effect on the day before the date of the enactment of this subsection with respect to such silencer. And so that would basically be a statutory edict that says, listen, if they're compliant with federal law, well, then they have met all their registration requirements. Would that be sufficient for Washington State? Who knows? But the bigger problem is that currently Section 3 of the Shush Act is not incorporated in the big, beautiful bill. So if you're going to get on the horn and you're going to start calling your legislatures, especially if you're in states like Washington or any other states that have similar legislation, you have to encourage your legislators to get Section 3 put back into the big, beautiful bill. Okay, so listen, I hope that answers all the questions that you might have about suppressors, and now you realize that, well, they're just not as scary and evil as some make them out to be. Maybe that's why in most Western European countries you can actually just buy them over the counter without having a background check. Listen, all you guys need to carefully watch what's happening with this budget reconciliation, and therefore I strongly encourage you to keep tuning in to Braden over at Langley Outdoor Academies, to Jared over at Guns and Gadgets. We're going to link them both up down below. Great guys, great channels. Thanks to all my friends here at Securite Gun Club who were willing to help out, especially Travis. And hey, by the way, if you guys are in the area and you want to come by and check out Washington's premier indoor shooting facility, I will let you know that they also have suppressors in their rental counters. So if you want to dip your toes into the suppressor world and see what this is all about, come on into Securite Gun Club. Tell them Bill sent you. Listen, if you got any other questions about this or anything else related to what's left of our Second Amendment rights, you guys should know how to get a hold of Washington gun law by now. But if you don't, that's okay. That information down there in the description box. If you got an idea for a video we should be doing around here, you click on that link right there and you tell us all about it. If you want to subscribe to our monthly newsletter, all of that information is down there in the description box. And then finally, and most importantly, let's everyone remember that part of being the lawful and responsible gun owner, like we talk about all the time here, is to know what the law is in every situation and how it applies to you in any instance that you may find yourself. Until next time, thanks for watching and stay safe.